You gave me. Oh, okay.
Just cut this first part out.
You don't have to edit it out. Hello, it's the podcast.
It's the
We
podcast.
started. No Ryan this week. We got the MMA podcast. I'm talking first, even though Sriram's the host, because I
We're both
like to
hosts.
oppress him as a minority. You know how it is. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the MMA podcast. Another week of no event. So what are we doing this week?
We are doing the end of year awards, which there will be an article coming out soon, but this is just kind of a preliminary discussion about what the three of us think.
We're also watching the collapse of U.S. democracy, but that's in the background. It's less important than end of the year awards. So
Coup of the year.
yeah.
The collapse seems more assured than like who we're picking for the awards. So I think there needs to be more discussion about the awards.
Yeah, it's actually going to be a discussion. That's the difference.
Yes. It's actually contentious. Yeah, and who do we have here with us?
We have Ed Gallo, who is the smartest person
Well,
I know
obviously.
on this earth. We have myself, and we are the usuals. And we have Iggy Shackelberger, who is a writer for the fight site, Twitter user extraordinaire, and also one of the smartest people I know.
You might know him as Chungus Khan on Twitter.
Oh yeah, you should know him as Chungus Khan.
Yeah, I also have.
Now, right? It's not Kyoji Khan.
Kyoji Khan is like a celebratory profile name in the wake of Kyoji Horiguchi's triumphant return to form.
Easy fight.
Yeah, easy fight. I also host the Tengridome podcast that's been on hiatus for quite some time, so maybe I'll get back to that.
Triumphant return to podcasting right here.
Yeah.
Through our own last week.
Most well-organized podcasts on the internet. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah,
but it's the only podcast done by a person that lives in a Siberian village that has better audio quality than Heavy Hands.
Better audio quality than Heavy Hand and better audio quality than Frank Trigg on the Ryzen broadcast.
Frank Trigg was broadcasting from the Mariana Trench. He was actually using the built-in mic on his laptop. That's the standards of broadcasting we have in MMA here.
He had several seconds lag. It was so amazing. It's like the guy would say something and Frank Trigg was like, yes, I agree. And like it's like he wasn't even watching the fights. But yeah, we have the end of year awards stuff.
Yes, I agree.
That's what the YouTube commentator says Sriram sounds like.
What's that?
Every video, the YouTube commenters have something to say about Sriram's audio quality.
Oh yeah, apparently like I hit a peak somewhere in the middle, and now it's all the way back down.
It's only going downhill from here.
It just fluctuates based on your mood.
That's constant.
It's downtrending for years.
Hard to go down more. Fighter of the year.
Awards? Fighter of the year?
We're going to start with that. And it's pretty much unanimous, as it should be, unless there's some...
It's pretty much unanimous as Joseph Figaro.
Guest host Frank Trigg.
Fighter of the year. I'm pretty comfortable saying that the pick on the fight site will be Deiveson Figueiredo, who won 4 times this year, 2 against the same opponent. One of those fights not all that meaningful, but 3 distinct opponents, 3 top flyweights, and he pretty much beat them all. So
also managed to cut weight twice in 1 month and didn't die.
Yeah, dude's huge. Dude's absolutely massive. Now, last time, me, Ed, and Ryan Wagner pretty much handled Fig's last 2 fights. We'll probably give the Benavidez fights a little bit of a talking here. But first off, I want to know what Iggy thinks, because he's the one who has not had his thoughts documented on this podcast. So, Iggy, what are your thoughts on things?
Well, I wanted to go against the grain and quote Phil McKenzie on his, because I actually agree with him in that I think Deiveson Figueiredo is too small a person to give him Fighter of the Year. Meanwhile, heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic is a very large and strong man, so he wins by default. It's actually a view some people have. but yeah, Figgy kind of just pulled all the stops, like went sicko mode and actually stayed active, unlike most champions do in the UFC, and did that naturally for peanuts because he's a flyweight. And he did the impossible. He managed to turn around Dana White on how he treats flyweights by being huge and having enormous punching power and really violent. And well, as we already mentioned, that he managed to cut weight like twice in the span of a single month while being enormous and didn't die of organ failure. And most of his fights were like his last Moreno fight was really back and forth. Well, it was not back and forth, despite the attempts the attempts from Joe Rogan and DC to convince us otherwise. So all his performances were really dominant this year, and he basically won the first Benavidez fight and should have been champion from there. But since he's ginormous, he missed weight, so he had to beat him a second time. It did it even more violently and heartbreakingly so. And I mean, there's really no other argument here for fighter of the year. I mean, Khabib's fought an excellent fight, but he retired immediately afterwards, so he doesn't count on account of his activity and all.
Yeah,
yeah. So it's Fig from me. No argument here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost argue that Benavidez 1 was kind of more competitive than Moreno, because Moreno took round 4, kind of, maybe not, and Benavidez took round 1. I think a bit more convincingly, honestly. Like, the first time I thought it was a Fig round, but also I thought there was a knockdown when Fig just kind of shoved him down at the end. But yeah, without that,
Benavidez actually connected meaningful offense and didn't connect with slappy jabs that made Joe Rogan then cream his pants every time he whiffed on something.
With that said, I fully understand completely retconning the first round of that fight, because fight 2 was like an absolutely biblical beating on Figueiredo's part. It was nasty to watch. And I mean, I think the impressive thing with Figueiredo is how consistently he's able to come in with smart game plans. Against Benavidez, it was the counterpunching, as Benavidez did his janky combination work. It's really smart and it's really good, but it's also janky at the same time, and that's what people tend to see, and Figueiredo made people see it even more.
People tend to shoehorn Figueiredo as this just simply a ginormous man that is athlete man with big bonk, but he actually does really crafty things to like bank on his attributes and not just use them as a crutch, as some people believe. Like, for example, against Moreno, he would consistently adapt adapt every time Moreno had success with something. Moreno would connect with a jab, and Figueiredo immediately went to baiting the jab in order to connect with a cross counter. And little things like that kept happening throughout the fight. So and Figueiredo is also great because you can actually see him thinking, because he's not completely automatically just comes in with a good game plan. He just adapts on the fly, and you can see like the gears turning in his head. And it's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that Ryan brought up a while ago, is that Figueiredo versus Moreno was kind of brought up as like this athlete versus the technician. And I was never sure that was particularly accurate, because Moreno's also, as we saw with him not dying with like the first round, he's also kind of a stupid athlete when it comes to
Figueiredo is a stupendously durable man. It's insane. You can't label him a non-athlete simply because he doesn't explode like a nuclear bomb every time he wants to connect with something. He's insanely durable and insanely and his stamina is just outrageous.
Yeah, it definitely dovetails with what Ed brought up last time about how athletes aren't just the Figueiredos.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you think you're a non-athlete listener and you feel like have decent stamina and can take a punch, don't feel bad.
Yeah, don't feel bad about that. There's other things you should feel bad about.
Yeah, Figgy would still do you though.
Yeah, that's the thing. Moreno doesn't need to feel bad about being a non-athlete, because he definitively is not a non-athlete. But he does kind of need to feel bad about being less good at using those athletic traits than Figueiredo, because Moreno kind of relies on his chin a lot in terms of being able to push a pace, and that's not particularly actionable against a Figueiredo who, for example, if Figueiredo has a cardio issue, he's very good at limiting his opponent's volume with his counterpunching and smashing their body until they cry. So
when he gets tired, he just says, "I'm going to throw harder now."
I respect that.
Gaichi and Figgy share the same trait in that they're able to limit exchanges by leveraging their power against their opponents, and so the opponent gets. It was kind of like a Ferguson Gaichi situation where Moreno would want to pour on volume, but he'd get punished for that volume for trying to do so every time he connected with something, and he didn't manage to get the ball rolling for the entirety of the fight, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really clever fight because I brought this up last time. It's that Moreno's lead hand was kind of like the story of the matchup going in, and Figueiredo was very quick at getting to both, pull away from it to play with his gauge of distance, cross countering it, playing with these little like crouches to jab with him and left hook as he threw the jab. I mean, Moreno didn't have no success, or else it wouldn't be a great fight, but it was a pretty commanding fight on Figueiredo's part.
Yeah, last thing I want to say about this fight before it turns into a Fig Moreno discussion is that connecting with a jab a lot doesn't mean you have a good jab. It means you just have a volume jab. A jab is more than just connections. You have to like play around with it. You have to play with the rhythm. You have to feint with it in order to set up other offense. It's not just a weapon on its own. And if Moreno was punished for using that basically throughout the entire fight. So, yeah, Fig train, yeah, way, let's go, Figgy. I hope you don't die in the next time you cut weight. I hope you don't cut weight twice a month going forward. That's horrible.
The last fight in that was Perez, which was regrettably forgettable. Perez just kind of got guillotined in the middle of the first round.
Just comically fast finish. Just, oh, I'm going to take you down now. Oh no, you're not going to take me down now. Okay, I sub you now. Goodbye.
Can we stop? Can we just not talk about that fight ever again? Okay. For my sake, protect my feelings.
Yeah, Ed talked a big game about Perez's ability to wrestle.
He did take him down. Oh man.
Did he take him down?
Fig was just no.
Yeah, Fig just
he did take him down, and Fig was just no.
Well, Fig bailed because he knew he couldn't stop him from taking him down. That's what
he could just grab the fence again.
Happened in the Moreno fight a lot too. I revisited that fight today just because we talked a lot about Fig's takedown defense, and more of the times that Fig got taken down than I remember, it was actually him trying to counter in some way and not actually failing his defense, more of just not having defense and looking for counters instead.
Oh yeah, it's like that.
He did his little Uchimata thing in like the 4th or 5th round after 4 rounds of trying.
Yeah, it's like that first takedown where like Moreno had the waist lock and Fig, instead of fighting grip strength, he just like rolled forward and butterflied him.
F it, Granby roll.
He Fatman rolled like in Dark Souls, and that's what the actual name is.
When you're the size that Fig is for flyweight, every roll is a fat man roll. Anyway.
Yeah, so fight of the year.
So let's move on.
Yeah, that's fighter of the year. It's all pretty open and shut. Fight of the year is a lot less open and shut.
Yeah. We really split up on that in terms of who thinks what fight is the best.
All equally valid arguments, especially yours.
Yeah,
most valid.
Let's start with Ed. You picked Holloway and Volkanovski too.
I did pick Holloway and Volkanovski too, but this is like peak hipster mode of it was the most technicalist of the fights, and not because it was like so much action. But all right, listen though, there was a decent amount of action. It was a high volume fight, lots of momentum shifts. There were knockdowns. It had all the stuff that people like about fights, but it was also just like with regard to like skill and depth in striking, the best fight of the year in that regard as well. So I felt like it ticked all the boxes. It just wasn't crazy insane violence, which is kind of what you got out of Fig Moreno and like Weili Zhang and Ioane and Yojic. Like that was like super high volume, and they're just getting hit with everything. So that was like probably what people liked about those. That's why people think Hermance and Vittori was a good fight, which it was not. But Volkanovski, Holloway too. That was like, okay, yeah, like lots of stuff is happening, but all this stuff is good. And Dan Albert has an article coming out about that fight, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Max Volk 2 was this sort of fight that you sometimes see shown in anime, with the characters would freeze in place and just you could see the the gears turning in their head, and they're in a monologue going, if he does this, I'm going to use my special move. But if I use my special move, he's going to use his another special move. What do I do? And then just sort of the dynamic actually plays out, and it takes like a couple of seconds, and then Volk suddenly goes down. And then he goes up, and then suddenly Max is the one getting pushed back and counted. Yeah, it was really interesting. But yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a hipster pick as well.
Thank you.
Because yeah, Max Volk seems to be edging on the doc that we're currently looking at, consulting. Yeah, about Zhang versus Yojic, the thing is that while it was a very violent and action-packed fight, it was also like their technical and deficiencies allowed for that to happen, because it was just two girls with kind of meat and potatoes striking, just finding holes in each other's defense and connecting with everything. So I just I can't. I'm a misogynist. I hate women.
That's the official position of the fight site.
Yeah, that's our official position. We hate all women. If you're a woman and listening to this, please, well, continue listening by all means. But yeah,
give us money from the kitchen.
Yeah.
Oh my god. It's too far. I'm calling out on air, Sriram. That is sexist. It went from joke territory to real sexism.
Yikes.
Holding you accountable.
Yikes. Yeah. Draw and quote as Sriram.
We're having
right
a
on there.
Cancelled here right now. At least you didn't impersonate a female. Is that sexist to do a girl accent?
I think I'm naturally doing a girl accent.
Oh geez. It's great.
So right. I think Sriram also had a hipster pick for this.
I don't even know. That transcends hipsterism, but you go ahead.
It's absolute hipster.
Defend your position.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, Holloway Volkanovski too. I enjoyed the fight a lot. I think it's definitely in the running for fight of the year. Something like Poirier Hooker, for instance, is just like kind of crazy, stupid, mindless violence, which is fun. And it was even less mindless than like Weili Zhang versus Yojic or Hermance and Vittori, which wasn't even super violent. It was just kind of like the same two things happening over and over. But yeah, I mean, I think what I really enjoyed about it is how it interacted with the first fight. It was, if you look at, like, for example, Volkanovski fights, like, he's already had a first fight in each of his first fights. So, like, for example, for Holloway, he was kicking, but he knew that Holloway would, like, counter with the jab, and he would counter that, like, proactively. And Holloway, this time, he had, like, the same experience where he actually had a first fight to build off. You know, he could, like, counter the dipping jab with the uppercut, and then Volkanovski would adapt, like, a round later. It was insane. But, yeah, my pick is complete hipster. It's, like, the hipster of hipsters. I believe it happened in September. Abdulaziz Abdulwahab versus Alexander Sarnavsky. If you can't pronounce the names, don't worry about it, because no one's going to ask you about it. But yeah, AAA won the lightweight belt again for the second time after losing it to Ali Bagov against an opponent who was a lot trickier than I think people would have expected, mostly because the wrestling did not work at all for AAA somehow. So yeah, it was AAA's usual struggles with strong outfighters, where Sarnavsky would kind of pivot around him, take angles and exchanges as AAA stepped in, and poor AAA with his dumb T-Rex arms not be able to catch it. And but as the fight went on, even though Sarnavsky kind of completely destroyed his body in like the first couple rounds, AAA still had the gas to push hard, kill him in the clinch, and take a pretty clear unanimous decision. I'd recommend a watch. I have an article out on it that I believe all the videos should still be up, because that was the first one I did with GIFs, so go check that out. And
yeah, it's a real interesting fight, because it can serve as a study material for people who have trouble like cutting off outfighters with their footwork, because AAA would use the threat of the clinch in order to he would use the clinch and tie-ups and bodywork in order to tire Sarnavsky out while getting body shotted himself. And the clinch, in combination with the bodywork, actually managed to do more work than Sarnowski's very potent body work in the first rounds did. But of course, it also owes itself to Triple A being an insane Terminator that can't be hurt. But yeah, I highly recommend you watch this fight as well. It's also an interesting study material in how Russian MMA fighters approach their boxing technique, because it's really Soviet-like. They have these weird like loopy hooks. It looks very interesting. I think even if it's not your fight of the year, it's going to be interesting. So watch this fight. It's brilliant.
There's one more fight that I wanted to talk about before we get to Iggy's real pick, which is, probably the best fight we've discussed so far. But before Max Volk 2, my fight of the year pick was Josh Emmett versus Shane Burgos. Was that five rounds? That was the main event?
3. That was only 3.
It was 3 rounds. It was such a banger. And I think if you err more toward the side of I just need to watch some crazy violence where lots of stuff happens and they go nuts, it definitely meets that niche, but it was actually pretty complex, just with regard to what was actually going on. And there were like shifts in momentum, but not just like, oh, I hit you harder and now I have the upper hand, because they were hitting each other hard the whole time. But it was mostly like Josh Emmett like getting better at fighting before our eyes, which is really cool. And just drawing Shane Burgos into a crazy fight, and Shane Burgos just being super stubborn, saying, I'm going to continue to fight you the same way, and I'm going to make it work, and just going to keep selling out on my chin and just using my chin to get to you. And it just ended up being absolutely bonkers. Which, some people would say that Poirier Hooker was kind of in the same category and longer. But Poirier Hooker just had so many like, why are you doing that type of decisions, where I'm like, this isn't like these guys.
It's a Dustin Poirier fight.
It was Dustin Poirier like doing his best to lose that fight and still pulling it out. And I was like, all right, that gave me anxiety. Whereas Emmett Burgos was just fun.
Yeah, the main difference is that Josh Emmett was actually improving as the fight went along while on one leg. Meanwhile, Dustin Poirier was handicapping himself in order to make it more competitive, almost. Like, okay, let's have fun. Just, like, take me down.
Has one I'm gonna... so he kind of has to, like, be fair.
Yeah, pretty much.
Emmett Burgos was fantastic. I also did an article on it. I think it was Burgos definitely did sell out on his chin late in the fight, and that he would have died like early in round 3 if he hadn't. But it was also a pretty tricky defensive fight from him early in the fight, where he eventually figured out, well, first of all, Emmett could like never really hit him on the lead in like the first couple of rounds, and Emmett started like counterpunching him, and then Burgos was like, hey, if I jab, he can't counterpunch me, and he jabbed, and Emmett couldn't counterpunch him, and then Emmett was like, hey, I can't counterpunch him, so then he just figured out how to hit him on the lead again. It was a really satisfying kind of progression to the fight, where Emmett just turned into Joseph Benavidez somehow. So yeah, it was great. That's a good shot.
And finally, Iggy, what is the actual best fight of the year?
Yeah, I'm going to like start from the beginning and explain my process. Like, my first pick was also Max versus Volk 2, but then I sort of like went back and thought about it, and I realized that I didn't really enjoy it as much as some other people, because I'm a dumb, vicious orc and I like seeing violence. And I almost picked Jan versus Aldo, which was an excellent fight up until the final round. It was like excellent, amazing technical violence from start to almost finish, and the fight should have been stopped after the 4th round, and then for some reason Aldo's corner just let him go into the 5th round, and then and on top of that, besides being like an extremely like violent finish, also the referee turned out to be like an evil energy vampire that feeds on other people's suffering and on the suffering of viewers and fight fans, and let it continue for almost half a round while Aldo was just squirming on the ground, getting beat up, like most of the blood, getting most of the blood out of his face, beat out of his face. It was just it was hard to watch. And so after many hours of rumination and like reflection, I decided that my pick for fight of the year is actually pregnant pause, Derek Lewis versus Alexei Oleinik.
It's obvious if you think about it.
Yes.
Yeah, just I mean, sit down and think about it for a while. I mean, your first reaction might be that who the fuck is this guy? Why did they allow him to record this with them and ruin the credibility of the website? But I mean, it's first of all, it's big dumb lads fighting. Second of all, it's Derek Lewis, who's just an endless, like, boundless fountain of comedy whenever he fights. And he's actually trying to improve. He's actually trying to learn how to wrestle and defend takedowns instead of just bench pressing people out off him. And Alexei Oleinik is like, I mean, the fight was like basically alternate universe flyweight. If you want to imagine like what the heavyweights would have looked if they were actually good and they were trying like things that make sense and limit the dumb brute violence and try and grapple, just watch this fight. It's so insane. I was watching it and it was an out of body experience for me because I literally thought that I ended up in an alternate universe where flyweight is actually the shit division, meanwhile heavyweight is the good division.
The majority of fans believe that, so it's not that contrary.
Yeah, I mean,
go back double against it.
I mean, it's like a shitty Ouroboros, a shitty snake that eats its own tail.
I'm a hipster among hipsters because I believe the casual take.
Yes. Yeah. I've circled back. I've done such a hipster pick that I've circled back around to being a casual.
You worked yourself into a shoot. Cool. I'm checking the document right now, and be it intentional or not, we don't have anything not from the UFC on this entire list. And I just want you to know, I watch other organizations. I think it just so happened that this year it was all UFC stuff.
I'm superior because I had an ACA pick.
Yeah, ACA I didn't watch as much this year because all their best guys weren't really fighting, or when they did fight, they didn't look good.
Yeah, Vartan and Kokov was set.
But yeah, last year we did have some non-UFC stuff. Just to let you know that it's not just that we don't.
I think comeback. I think comeback of the year should be Kyoji Horiguchi.
We don't have comeback of the year.
We should. we should have one just for Kyoji.
Yeah, career comeback for sure. Horiguchi, gets knocked out and loses his streak, then comes back and easy fight. What's a better story than that?
I mean, also we could for some of the year there was AJ McKee.
Yeah.
Because that was like genuinely weird.
It was. Let's talk about that when we get there. So performance of the year. I always have trouble with this one because it's like when someone looks really, really good in a fight, to most people, a lot of the time it's also because the other person looked really bad. And you have to leverage, like, okay, how much of that is the good person making them look bad? How much of it is, not that? So that's what's going to be like the argument, I think, between each one. If that's how you want to go with performance of the year, like if you just like, sometimes it's objectively easy to tell when one fighter is having like the performance of their life and like fighting, out of their mind really well. For example, something that we didn't pick, Matt picked it. Matt picked Jose Aldo's performance versus Peter Yan, a fight that he lost. So obviously Matt is dumb and that can't be the pick. But it's a good example of how you might arrive at that kind of point, just because, Aldo, after losing sort of to Marlon Moraes and being clearly past his prime and on a losing streak, I think
he's also a mummy.
Yeah, being a mummy and just being not himself physically at all, came out and like fought really well versus Peter Yan. And like the really obvious thing for people to see was he was kicking. He was kicking a lot. So people were like, oh, Aldo used to kick and now he is kicking again.
This is prime Aldo we're seeing now. He's in his prime still.
He's back to his prime because he is throwing kicks. So that's like something you could latch onto. But obviously Matt is a ridiculous person. That can't be the answer because he lost. So I'll just start with the one that I picked. I picked Khabib's performance versus Justin Gaichi, and there is a lot of fair criticism of how Justin Gaichi approached the fight and some of the stuff he did in the fight, like deciding that outfighting and like keeping Khabib like a certain distance from him, maintaining that range. None of us thought that was a good idea coming into the fight. We all acknowledged it was possible because that's what he's been doing his last few fights. So like, oh no, this might just be the new normal. Maybe it is. And he didn't pressure. So he didn't approach the best game plan versus Khabib. But considering the fight that they had, Khabib did basically everything you would want him to do, pressuring Gaichi, and, you know, ate some crazy shots and found ways to, you know, have some shots like slide off him a little bit or hit him like, you know, top back of the head, you know, places that aren't quite as dangerous as full flush face breakers. You know, took a bunch of leg kicks, and also just the game planning, you know, changing up his attacks, you know, hitting that double, you know, on his knees and turning the corner, something we haven't seen him do in the UFC, something that he probably hasn't done for a long time. So just the adaptation and just fighting a really clean fight, a very straightforward approach, you know, one of the least hole-ridden performances he's had in a long time. The Dustin Poirier fight last year got some awards from people, and I just didn't really consider that as impressive a performance because of how dumb Dustin Poirier was being, like backing himself all the way up to the cage, jumping on the guillotines, like stuff like that. But you know, at the same time, you know, Justin Gaethje didn't really do himself that many favors either, and then once it went to the ground, didn't really look like he had much of an idea.
Yeah, he basically made it look like he knows zero BJJ, which is something that actually people actually believe these days.
He made it look like that, but he was just tricking us into believing that.
I mean, maybe it was just his spirit of entertainment. He didn't want us to get bored watching him still.
I think people are underestimating how quickly a lot of those transitions happen. Like I watched the fight again today, and there wasn't all that much time for Gaethje to do things.
Yeah, I mean, basically he fought the best grappler in the world in MMA, and just, I mean, obviously you're going to look bad against him at some point. Yeah.
So that's my pick for performance of the year. Just Khabib looked very impressive, and then he got to retire on the win against probably the most dangerous opponent of his career, and what could have been a really, really tough stylistic matchup, but be it a combination of his approach and Gaethje's approach, or just his approach, or what have you, it turned into easy fight. So that's why I picked that.
I mean, my original pick, and that's the pick on the document, was Khabib, or not Khabib, Gaichi versus Tony Ferguson. But also, now that I kind of think of it, it kind of loses some shine, given that the same approach kind of got him wrecked. Like, it was a very good fight from Justin Gaethje, and I'll probably stick with it because Ferguson kind of got his ass whooped completely. But it also kind of represents a progression towards a style of fighting that I don't want Gaethje to go towards, if that makes sense. Like, I think pressure Gaethje could have done Tony Ferguson just as badly, and Donald Cerrone just as badly. Like, that kind of goes without saying for anyone who's good. But that said, it was a terrific performance, and I'm probably just going to stick with it because that's what I have on. Gaethje versus Ferguson at UFC 249 to win the interim lightweight championship. Gaethje came in, I believe, like semi-short notice, which makes it pretty impressive. I think it was one of those fights that made people realize how good Justin Gaethje was at several things that he was good at all along, but they were all kind of subordinate to his pressure attack and didn't get the shine that they deserved against like his first three opponents, which were all like pretty awful matchups for him, like in terms of, you know, just like archetypes, three guys who could like really rip through a guard and not get counterpunched super easily. But Tony Ferguson, pretty much every one of his bad habits on the feet got ripped apart. The way that he'd square up in the pocket to get bombed by the right hand, his kind of messy exits where he'd like leave side on, and Gaethje would track him down with the left hook. It was a very simple, elegant performance that was only marred by that uppercut in the second round, and then Whitman was like, "Hey, don't be a complete idiot," and then he wasn't, and he didn't get uppercutted again. So, Gaethje versus Ferguson's my pick.
The thing with Gaethje is that he has a talent for making people think he's actually bad. because his earlier style made people think that he's like some kind of dumb brute that doesn't know how to defend himself, that can only bang. And then after losing and defeating, like going on his win streak and then losing to Khabib, now people think that he's actually like he has zero grappling. So it's a unique talent of his to make people underestimate him, which I suppose something that he could bank on going forward against like Chucky Olives and other people with grappling games, solid grappling games. And yeah, the thing about performance of the year, it's like it's a tricky subject because how do you rate someone's performance, as Ed has pointed out? Like, is it the cleanliness of the performance? Is it the quality of the opponent against you, against whom you had this performance? And so Ben Cohn actually had like a really good point about this. He made separate rankings. Like one column was quality of performance against quality opponent, and the other was cleanliness of the performance. Like how easily did you dismantle your guy? And in the second column, his number one pick was Izzy versus Costa, which is obviously like a flawless performance. But then again, with the caveat that Costa literally did nothing. He just stood there getting kicked up and torn to pieces. And in the left column, in the quality performance column, he picked, I'm pretty sure he picked Khabib versus Gaichi as well. But yeah, this is just an interesting idea that maybe we could play around in the future, or some other people may take note of when rating someone. Just an interesting concept. But yeah, my pick. Well, obviously, I think I'm also leaning towards Khabib versus Gaichi. But my first pick was also Gaichi versus Tony Ferguson. But now that I think of it, it was also the sort of thing that it's really compelling to pick it because Gaichi fought against type first of all, and fought against type very well. Like late career style changes are extremely taxing mentally and physically, and it's extremely they're extremely difficult and can take a lot out of a fighter, and in some cases they ruin fighters because they no longer fight to their strengths. But in this case, it was Gaichi actually revealing the strengths that he already had, like his reflexes on the counter, his ability to pick his openings, but also it was a sort of performance that revealed all of Tony Ferguson's flaws, because Ferguson was just following him around, getting clattered, and so it's kind of like either or. Was it actually Gaichi that performed so well, seeing as he got done by Khabib so quickly with his pressure game, with Khabib's pressure, or was it Tony enabling Gaichi to shine in that particular fight? Because it was a frequent criticism of Gaichi's win streak, late career win streak, was that the matchups just simply got really, really easy. So I guess I'm. As much as I love that fight, I suppose I'm leaning towards Khabib versus Gaichi as well. Simply because Khabib was basically also did things that we never saw him do, and maybe it was a very informative performance, because we had this thing for years and years where we would say, "Oh, Khabib has holes. Khabib doesn't do these things," and fighters usually don't do things that they never shown in previous fights. We can only bank on things. We can only pick based on things that we already saw, and Khabib has shown things that we actually never saw. Right. nice buttered butter there. Nice tautology there, but yeah. Khabib versus Gaichi, hands down.
Sounds really like that's going to be the pick for the site, and seems to be the overwhelming pick. Yeah. I like the Izzy versus Costa shout, but that one, I think it's a lot easier to say this seems to be a lot about the other guy just doing a bad job.
Yeah. Like Gaichi versus Tony and Costa versus Izzy both have this thing, but with Costa, it's extremely obvious that he didn't come in.
Nothing.
Genuinely nothing. He just stood there.
Yeah,
that's all he did.
Ineligible for the award because his opponent was inert. which is why Yoel Romero should really be winning awards for his win over Izzy, because he won by doing nothing, which I think
Absolutely.
is pretty amazing. Here's another category that I have a tough time defining. So Breakout Fighter of the Year. We picked our categories based on what categories people do with these kinds of awards, and then just tried to figure it out from there. Breakout Fighter of the Year is always weird to me because, it's inherently, just based on the name, it feels like it should be about someone who like broke out from the pack, right? They were in whatever pack they were in. Now they're in a new pack, or they're on their own. Whatever. I don't know what kind of animal it is. Are they wolves? They went from
Wolves and
pack animals to
sheepdogs.
wolves. I don't know.
Wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs.
They're sheepdogs now. Tim Kennedy for the
Shout
Breakout
out Tim
Fighter of the Year
Kennedy.
award. He is a sheepdog. Always. But I guess what confuses me is, does it have to be someone that broke out from, not being on the radar at all to being on the radar? Could they have been someone who was like, top 20-ish type of guy, and they became, elite? How do you do it? What do you say? So that's why our picks are all over the place, and I haven't made a pick yet. Actually, I haven't figured out what I want to say. But I think there are at least 4 or 5 different choices on here, and the one I have issues with all of them, honestly. The one that seems to be popular and that Ben picked from the group, I guess is the one I'd like to talk about first, is Hamza Chimaev, who went from not being in the UFC to having 3 wins in the UFC and being very, very, very popular, considering being a 3-0 fighter against, sorry to Gerald Meerschaert, nobody. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's obviously the takeaway from this is, yeah, he definitely broke out into a new position, ranked as well, unsigned to ranked in a year after beating nobody, in impressive fashion, as impressively as he can beat nobody. So you can't really knock the performances. You could just knock the opposition, but you can't make critical evaluations until he fights somebody better, or until you see some sort of gaps in the armor. So it makes sense to nominate Chimaev for this award. I'm just wondering, can we play with the definition of the award to give it to other people? Because I'll let someone else take it for Kevin Holland. But just my issue with the Kevin Holland pick is, has he really broken into a different tier? It just seems like he's been winning in the same tier. Of course, the Jacare win is going to change people on that. But in fact, if you look closely, you'll see that Jacare has actually slipped down into Kevin Holland's tier and not the other way around. What do you guys feel about this category?
Yeah, the Khamzat pick is weird to me, because giving Khamzat Chimaev Breakout of the Year award feels like giving him an award for getting in the UFC, and that's it. Like, got in the UFC the fastest award. Like, well done. And when you think about it, I actually can't recall who he beat outside of Gerald Meerschaert. Who was the other guy?
Maurice McKee, 2 Europeans who can't wrestle.
Oh, yeah. Not Jack Marshman. I was thinking about Jack Marshman.
John Phillips and Jack Marshman are the same fighter. Don't
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They were the ones that showed up, like, bulging over their trousers back when it was in London, I believe. Yeah. Beat up 2 absolutely, like, literally beat nobody, basically. So I think he's ineligible, purely based on that. He's had 3 fights against who the fuck knows who. And Kevin Holland, yeah, beating it looked really funny. But I mean, if you knock Jacare Souza from the bottom, it tells more things about Jacare Souza than about the fighter that knocked him out.
Yeah.
Who else was there?
Sriram, how you feeling about this? I know all this Gerald Meerschaert slander is hurting you.
Yeah, I mean, I have indeed heard of Gerald Meerschaert, but I'd feel more comfortable about considering that like a big breakout victory if Chimaev like did more things in the fight to say that he is in a tier of someone higher than Gerald Meerschaert. And one punching someone doesn't really do that for me, if I'm honest, because like it was one punch.
He didn't beat him hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah. We needed to see
weird.
Meerschaert die in order for us to rate it.
He beat him too hard. He beat him too hard. He beat him so hard that I'm not sure if
I
Meerschaert is
understand.
just like
Just giving you
fucking shit now or shot or something like that. Or even if it can be replicated, like if Meerschaert doesn't just get walked to the fence in like 0.2 seconds. So yeah, Chimaev's tough. I picked Drew Dober, and I think that's like it kind of goes into the broke out into a new tier thing because I think
you're picking Drew Dober simply because he showed up shirtless for your interview with him. That's the real reason.
That's how he really broke out. Okay, Jesus.
He broke out of his shirt.
But yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that before the Nasrat Haqparast fight in January of last year, he was kind of like an action fighter, a gatekeeper type, kind of like sub 20, I think. Like Beneil, he kind of beat the crap out of Beneil Dariush at the beginning of 2019, and then got subbed, and we're like, oh, that's so Drew Dober. And then he beat Marco Polo Reyes, but he'd been like alternating. So I think he was kind of in that 20 to 25 tier before, and now he's knocked out Nasrat Haqparast, who was very, very good. And he's knocked out Alexander Hernandez, who was less good, but also like kind of has a name in the division. So he's gone into like 15 to 10 territory. I believe he's fighting Islam Makhachev, which isn't going to go well, which is why I'm very happy that he is breakout star now and not like, that didn't happen before the end of this year.
I actually like that pick a lot more now that you've explained it, and I remembered who his fights were actually against. But it begs the question, why not Beneil Dariush for breakout fight?
Well, Beneil Dariush basically like it's not really him improving, it's him just basically releasing his inner beast.
Yeah, he rebranded. It was a rebrand, which is I think he broke out into a new tier of being fun for everyone, for the whole family.
I mean, if he had the Oliveira fight and won it, I think he'd be a runaway for both breakout and fighter of the year. But yeah, I mean, I think Dariush is weird because he's kind of like hung out at the same tier of competition he's always done. He's just like it's like a higher level version of Kevin Holland almost, where he's like kind of hanging out the lower top 15 level opponents, even though he's higher than that. He's like hanging out with like Scott Holtzman and Frank Camacho and like who else did he fight? Drakkar Klose. Like, it's all kind of the same tier, where Drew Dober kind of went from beating Marco Polo Reyes to being Nasrat Haqparast, which is kind of a bigger jump.
No one nominated him, but just based on kind of the way we're talking about it, maybe it's Charles Oliveira, even though no one nominated him, just because he went from beating the Jared Gordons and Nick Lentz times 6 of the world to ranked, contendery discussed type people like Kevin Lee and someone people were very high on Tony Ferguson. I mean, that's a tier jump. Now he's ranked and being considered for top 5 matchups. He's going to fight Justin Gaethje.
I mean, that kind of does raise the question of what's the difference, because we do have a most improved category where Charles Oliveira kind of ran the board.
This brings us back to the question of what's the difference between being a breakout, being a breakout and being like the most improved one. Like, what's the difference? Is the breakout based on like notoriety or what? Because I don't know this. Yeah, my breakout star of the year makes the most sense. It's like you may know him from his from the diner he runs, like this little diner, like that was on the verge of collapse, on the verge of financial collapse and bankruptcy with the COVID years, but he managed to bring it around by fighting. It's really inspiring story that all media should pick up. It's Glover Tejera. Exciting new prospect and foodie icon Glover Tejera. You can check out his diner on Instagram at Glover's Oldies and Goodies. Like he always makes the best pastries, and he made the best pastry out of no, I think it was a meat dish he made. He put it up on his Instagram lately, like a couple of days ago. I think it was a Brazilian meal. like something traditional. Yeah, it was Thiago Santos's meaty buttocks.
All this one the Lionheart. It's just Anthony's head Smith on a platter.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you started with Thiago Santos's meat, I was like, this is going to go into a different direction.
Yeah, let's follow the rabbit hole a little bit.
Yeah, Glover's an interesting pick. I mean, he did go from being a total gatekeeper, kind of like who's going to beat Glover. No one's going to beat Glover.
Everyone's gonna almost beat Glover.
Yeah, I mean, but it was Krylov who like got decision, and everyone else has just kind of gotten squished after beating him up for a little bit.
This is why it's easier to pick people who are younger in their UFC careers, because it's much more easy to identify this is what they were, this is what they are now. Whereas with older fighters who are more experienced, they've been through several waves of where people are placing their expectations. So we have not come to a decision, and we will not be coming to a decision during this podcast. We also don't know what the category is actually defined as. So that's just a garbage fire. Oh, wait, 1 sec. Speaking of things that are dumb, Ryan Wagner's pick for Breakout Fight of the Year is Merab Dvalishvili, and
What?
I really
What the
don't
fuck?
understand the
No.
rationale behind this, because he did set the takedown record, which is cool. It's a cool accomplishment. He broke out from being a guy that didn't have a record to being a guy that does have a record. So maybe that's it. But his 2020 was Casey Kenny, which I believe Ryan himself doesn't think that Merab won that fight. So, okay, interesting. Gustavo Lopez, who was like a short notice type of guy, and I don't think he was very good and couldn't wrestle. And then John Dodson, which was one of the worst fights of the year. And he had a really hard time with him, and it was pretty unimpressive. And before that, his wins were like in the UFC. Oh, you know what? He opened his UFC career with 2 losses. Merab did in 2018, 2017. Then he had 1 win over Tarion Ware in 2018, and Ware is just like the guy that they feed to the prospects, who's like just good enough to give them a fight and like make Tom Duquesnoy not look good.
And also Sean O'Malley.
Yeah. And then he beat Brad Katona, who I thought was decent, but turned out to be less decent than I thought. That was 2019. So, he was like, I'm starting to get it. He was like, all right, didn't really have much to his name at that point in 2019. Then 2020 beats 2 opponents worthy of recognition, with Casey Kenny and John Dodson. So despite it being pretty anticlimactic, his breakout is a really lame decision over John Dodson and perhaps a robbery over Casey Kenny. I can actually see the argument for this. I think there is a clear tier jump there. And is he ranked now? He's ranked top 15, I believe. So maybe I do want to vote for Merab Dvalishvili. I might vote for Chimaev.
I mean, it would be really funny if you picked Merab simply because 2 of his fights, like against notorious opponents, were really like shaky.
Is that more or less shaky than beating John Phillips and Maurice McKee? So it's just like,
yeah,
anything's less shaky than beating John Phillips.
Right.
So basically, the takeaway.
Like 90s tier.
The takeaway is that we shouldn't do Breakout of the Year for next year because
category.
This category makes no sense.
Well, now I'm going to go with 2 very contradictory things, because if we're going with the Chimaev route, then I figured, Ed, you'd be the first one to bring up Ilia Topuria, who beat 2 better guys, I would argue. I mean, Damon Jackson isn't very good.
Damon Jackson and Yusuf Zalal are better than
Yeah.
John Phillips and Reese McKee, and they're probably as good as Real Mearshart.
Yeah, I mean, and 2 Mearshart tier opponents better than Mearshart plus like those 2.
Into Mearshart.
Ilya also knows how to body punch, so I guess I'm picking him purely based on that.
Yeah, but he had like, some people might view his win over Zalal as competitive just because he had COVID and got really tired from beating him up after the first round. It wasn't competitive, but it was like, Zalal like almost took him down in the second round or something like that, and like was surviving, and just Topuria had to take him down a bunch of times to get him to stop coming at him. And Zalal was still there at the end. So like, I think Chimaev having the finishes is like what is breaking him out. So if Topuria had body punched to death both of his first 2 opponents, then maybe it'd be different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still consider him ahead of Chimaev just because I'm a complete hipster and I hate everyone who the UFC likes.
For the hipsters. Here we go. If you want some equality argument, Rafael Fiziev went from 1-1 in 2019, knocked out by Mustafayev, and beat Alex White in a kind of a contentious fight, to Jacasey and Moicano. Those are probably.
Yeah,
I
those are the
forgot
numbers.
about Fiziev. Yeah, he's had some really impressive performances
Oh,
against
that's my vote. Screw all these. Other
against
options.
actual opponents.
I like how
Quality
this is just fighters
performances.
we like now.
I'm writing it right. Yeah, well, I mean, it's our awards, so if I want to rig them in the favor of the guys I like, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that.
That's true.
Well,
I mean, you know who jumped several tiers as well with a single fight this year in December? Rob Font.
Yeah,
he
that's
really
the
did,
thing.
but like that's not really a thing.
I mean, that's the thing. If you beat the guys we like, then you become a guy we like, unless unless you could get some kind of asshole, or we really like the guy. So I guess my vote is also Fiziev because Moicano is a boy.
Came out of nowhere, just stole the whole category. Let's do a real category.
That's what
let's
a
do a
breakout
different one.
actually is.
I think we got a good choice there. Sure, I'm doing to introduce Gym of the Year.
Yeah, Gym of the Year, which is pretty open and shut, unlike, me being a hipster. And I agree with the general pick, but the majority is for Tiger Muay Thai, who brought in Peter Yan, and Alexander Volkanovski kind of shares time between
He's
City
like 50-50.
Kickboxing and Tiger Muay Thai. And of course, our new breakout star of the year, Rafael Fiziev, is also a Tiger Muay Thai product. So I'll let Ed kind of, set the stage, but that's probably going to be what our pick is.
You didn't even mention Damir Ismagulov.
He hasn't fought. He doesn't count.
He didn't fight in 2020?
He fought August 2019 and then died.
Oh my gosh.
I hate it so much.
Valentina Shevchenko is also Tiger Muay Thai.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
People don't talk about this, but she is.
Oh, Jesus. I am electing to ignore this information.
That's 3 champs, in my opinion, if we're going to take credit for Volk as well. So we got Jan, Volk, Shevchenko. I think most of the, Fiziev, a lot of different like up-and-comers all train there. And like City Kickboxing, they share a lot of talent between the two. I think they make the trips there a lot, so you can say they're influential in that regard. So there's probably a bunch of other people that I'm forgetting. But really, I think three champs is a good enough argument already. People are voting for not none of our staff did, but some people have voted for the name escapes me, Elevation Fight Team in Denver, which is sort of Trevor Whitman. He's not actually part of the gym, but it's Trevor Whitman. It's also Sean Madden, our friend, and some other coaches at that gym.
Whitman works really closely with the Elevation Fight Team, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's Justin Gaichi's official gym. Rose Namajunas, Alistair Overeem, Curtis Blades, Corey Sandhagen, other people perhaps.
There's several contenders.
That might be it. But yeah, good, a lot of top contenders these days. I just think the champions thing is probably a better argument.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
Whitman is kind of his own thing. It's not like he's tied to any gym. So any fighter that trains under Whitman is basically a Whitman product, not necessarily the product of the gym that they train at. So it's kind of like a tricky subject.
True.
Yeah. True. I mean, a couple gyms that I think deserve mention, although they're not probably winners. One, our friend Simon would really appreciate the Hoof shout out because he's actually done some pretty good work this year. Between Kamaru Usman, he's one of Hoof's champions, who had actually looked really improved in terms of his striking. I mean, I didn't really love the Colby Covington showing, but he did look improved there. That was the end of last year. And then Jorge Masvidal, where he was like parrying kicks and punching the body. It was pretty slick. And also Derek Brunson's turnaround has been down to Henry Hooft. And that's another contender, which middleweight desperately needs. The other one is Tyson Chartier, New England Cartel, it's pretty much carried by Cater and Mini Cater, which is Calvin Cater and Rob Font. But both of them hit the top 5 this year, I believe. I think Cater's number 6, but he's pretty much top 5 since like the entire top 5 is tied up in dumb guys who aren't fighting for years at a time. So 2 pretty much top 5 opponents. Rob Font broke into the top 5 by beating Marlon Moraes, brought him back from an injury to win that fight, and Calvin Cater won 2 fights. So those are probably but it's I think TMP is kind of a runaway candidate this time, just because of how many champions they have in deep divisions, and the champions they have being genuine pound for pound talents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, That seems pretty clear to me. Biggest fall offs for gym of the year, the people who had the highest stock prior to the year, I would say American Kickboxing Academy really lost a lot of steam. Which I don't want to say I'm happy about it, but we've always kind of been warning people about here are the issues with AKA. It's not the super camp you think it is. They just have a really tough room. They recruit really well right now, but their development isn't all it's snuffed up to be. And people say, "Oh, you're crazy. Look at the people." But now things are a little different, aren't they?
Yeah, aside from Khabib, it's been pretty rough.
Khabib
He did not train at AKA for this fight.
He didn't train at AKA for the Gaichi fight, which may not be true, but I'm choosing to assume it's because he didn't train at AKA. That's why he looked so much better.
Could be.
That is what happened to Rocco.
Done in a long time, like stuff from his Russian regional career. Does it again for the first time, the first camp he's not training AK in a while. That'd be a pretty crazy coincidence, I think.
Very true. But Daniel Cormier lost to Stipe Miocic. Cain Velasquez has fallen off the face of the earth. Who else? Deron Win.
Did have a victory in his last fight against his very good opponent, who was definitely competent.
Who was very big.
He was tall.
DC was so mad.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, the gym has lost a lot of talent, not just the results, but they just don't seem to be as popular as they were. And some of their promising up-and-comers, like some of their good wrestling recruits, like Kyle Kretschmer, who's a multiple-time All-American for Oklahoma State, he lost, I think, twice. He might have lost once or twice this year. And Ed Ruth, who made the move to AKA, lost twice and retired already. So tough blow for their prospects. They still have guys coming up like Nick Piccinini, but he hasn't fought yet. But it's a rough look for the gym, especially with COVID. Probably took all of the Dagestanis out of their gym, which was the big selling point of the gym, I think, right now, is that you can train with all these guys. You can train with Khabib and Islam Makhachev and all these guys. And now it's like mostly just their American talent base, and it's not going as well. So pretty hard fall off. Perhaps looking into the future, a gym who is really investing and seems to be building something up internationally is Team Alpha Male. Has really invested in China, which, say what you will about that, I don't know if it's the best idea, but they've been bringing in a lot of talent. And a lot of fighters are stopping in to train. And I think they're also making an investment in women's MMA. So rebranding as a gym.
Team Alpha Female.
They are Team Alpha now. They took away the male. Unironically, they did that.
Wow.
Anything else to say for Gym of the Year?
I guess Faber is woke now.
And anti-vax and woke simultaneously. Well,
I mean, that's what a Karen is.
Yeah, actually.
Wow. Yeah, we're moving on to the next category, which is Knockout of the Year. This one also seems like I don't see anyone winning this aside from Joaquin Buckley against Impa Kasanganay.
Spinny.
He did a good
Spinny. Spinny. Yeah, crazy kick dude versus guy who got crazy kicked. Kasango, bye-bye.
I think it's easy. I always want to represent the hipster position because that's who we are. It's easy for me to not want that to win because it's like, okay, yeah, it was cool, but it's just Joaquin Buckley and Impa Kasanganay. Like, who are they? But I actually have watched a couple of Kasanganay's fights before this, and he was someone I was keeping an eye on. I thought he was pretty decent for the weight. This is a middleweight, I believe. So he was like body punching a lot and is super jacked and like seems competent overall. So I'm like, all right, he's kind of interesting. And Buckley, I had similar thoughts watching him against Kevin Holland. Like he is spazzing out so hard right now. He's spazzing out to the body, and just seemed to be like kind of panicking. But he had some potential as well from what I was seeing. So those are decent enough guys where just the coolness of the knockout, just the aesthetic coolness of the knockout and the rarity, obviously is going to shoot it way up. I don't think the drawback of them not being elite fighters takes away as much as it would have with others. Like if it's just like a random regional knockout. So I think, officially it's gonna win. It doesn't really matter if I pick it or not. It's gonna win.
Yeah, this brings me to like, this made me think, like, how do you rate a knockout of the year? Like,
That's a good point.
what are the criteria? Is it simply the coolness, or is it simply the brutality? Because if you want to argue about quality, like, how was the knockout brought about? Like, was it set up cleverly? Was it against like a quality opponent? I mean, what it took the fighter to get the knockout? Because frequently knockouts of the year are just basically meme knockouts. So someone just got bonked and died, and that's it. And that's how you rate the knockouts. But really, like, some food for thought on how we're going to rate knockouts going forward.
Yeah, I think last year there was some very popular pick. Was Korean Zombie Yair last year? Or was that 2 years ago?
I think that was 2018.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Whatever. Whatever it was, there was some popular meme-ish knockout that people were voting for. And I voted for Adesanya Whitaker just because, one, it was even though it was sad, it was cool looking. It was very impressive looking. But also just the context, like that was one of the best wins of the year. And it's one of the best fighters who lost that year and knocked him out. So I'm like, that should probably be it, right? But we didn't really have anything like that this year. I saw somebody say it. I'm like, that's a good idea. Somebody said Cater Stevens for knockout of the year, and that's like a pretty solid opponent, and it's Cater showing off something a little bit new, like not like he added new dimensions to his game, but new like when they said Cain Velasquez is going to be a whole new fighter, and he came out against Travis Brown, throw a wheel kick. So
he did also elbow Dan Ige, so he is now a Muay Thai fighter.
He is Calvin Elbows. I don't understand the hands.
Calvin Corbett.
The hands Barboza feet Cater thing.
Calvin the Carnage. Calvin the Carnage. Cater. I like this development.
Yeah, I think the hands Barboza feet Cater thing is like both of them need to move in a very specific direction to win. They both need like a specific range that they can't really enforce super well. And
they are Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee, is what you're saying?
Pretty
the hands
much.
And feet version of each other. Okay, I get it now. I needed the Pokemon analogy.
But also Cater is better and wins bad style matchups better. So
maybe.
Perhaps. Well, I mean,
who's going to beat Max though? Maybe not Cater, but definitely Barboza.
Oh, okay.
This podcast is just chat memes that no one understands.
I have to point out, Hans Barboza versus Feet Cater is like my best joke ever that I have ever made during the course of my fight site career. I stand by it.
It's carried so far that I didn't even know it was your joke. It was just hard chat lore, and I was like, yeah, that's a good one. I don't know who did that, but it's good.
This is a podcast that people are gonna watch and be like, I got to be in this chat.
Yeah, that's the.
If you're not in the chat, it's worthless to you.
You can get in the chat.
Yeah, I think there are a couple other knockouts that people probably want to see mentioned. Cody Garbrandt versus Rafael Assunção is a popular pick. It depressed the hell out of me. I think it was like the narratively saddest moment of the UFC's entire history. It was very sad, but it was also spectacular. And
Garbrandt winning by being Garbrandt.
Yeah, I hate Garbrandt. Hate him so much.
The Marge Simpson meme from that fight is.
I'll grumble you, my son.
If that was a good-looking Assunção, I think that would probably be my pick because Assunção is better than Stevens historically, but he also looked kind of awful in that fight, in my opinion. And Garbrandt didn't really do anything particularly.
Let's be honest,
new.
We just don't want to give Cody credit.
No,
it's okay to admit it.
No,
I would if Assunção looked good, but he didn't, and that made it even sadder.
Even if Garbrandt beats Figgy, I'm still not going to give him credit.
Yeah, no,
I mean, come on.
He's worthless. He's useless.
Yeah,
he has no value in my eyes.
What are other ones?
O'Malley and Wineland was the other one.
Yeah, I mean, both of those kind of have like the same kind of theme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Wineland is ancient.
Getting one punched.
Yeah, old men. Francisco Trinaldo versus Jai Herbert, because Francisco Trinaldo is now an inversion of the old man meme, where he is an old man who wins. He is the Glover Tejera of the lightweights. So
yeah,
that was a fun one.
being an old man at lightweight is like extremely impressive, no matter like what your game is.
Yeah, and Trinaldo looked like the better fighter, gassed out, looked like the worst fighter, and then killed him with a single punch. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's a quality pick.
Yeah, I mean, what else is there?
I mean, there was a lot of cool stuff around the world, so just like with coolness. But like Magomed Bibulatov had a cool spinny wheel kick knockout, very clean. I think ACA had another really good up kick knockout. ACA had a lot of really amazing knockouts. Raul, top two. His name
didn't KSW have that crazy like bicycle kick KO?
Scott Askham
had a like a
it happened on the same night, I think. The same night that the Buckley KO happened.
Wow.
And Sanhagen Maurice was on that card.
Oh yeah, that was also a spinning cat
kick.
kick.
card was on that same day.
Oh, the spinning energy was peak. The planets were aligned. Mercury was in retrograde.
I don't know if it was the same card, but also Daniel Oliveira Jubilee knocked out ARD with a flying knee to the body, and that was pretty cool.
Daniel Oliveira to Electric Jubilee. I don't know if that's how you say his name. That's how you said it. So I'm like, all right.
I think it's like Jubilee or something, but I don't really know that works.
That's his name now. This is like when Rashad Evans thought that Yves Jaboy was pronounced Jaboy, and he did this whole elaborate setup of he's my boy, he's your boy, he's
Oh Jesus, man! This year was so long. I can't remember anything. Like I remember individual knockouts, but only if I'm prompted to. But otherwise, they all blend together.
Yeah. Like RDA Chiesa happening this year put me into a deep bout of depression.
Knocked out Sriram. Knockout of the year. Knocked the life out of Sriram's eyes.
Was it ever there?
I did not. You'll be happy to know that I did my Wrestling for MMA Awards podcast. Not solidified because I haven't done the article yet, but I did not mention RDA Chiesa on the podcast.
Cancel that fight. Remove it from the public record.
Does not exist.
Yojic versus Sakura was a cool knockout.
Yeah.
That was good.
Early stoppage though.
Yeah. The Sakura wasn't completely out. So kind of.
It was an acceptable stoppage. Like if MMA stoppages were reasonable, that would have been a fine one. But they aren't.
Yeah.
So just by the standards of MMA stoppages, it was early. But it was actually fine.
For it to be a quality MMA stoppage, Asakura should have ended up with like a broken jaw, the shattered nose, and like both his eyes leaking out of his skull. Because that's how just MMA works.
Aldo Yan was a good stoppage. That's what stoppage.
Yeah, excellent stoppage. I mean, early stoppage.
Sure that they're not going to make it.
Yeah, Aldo wasn't out.
Between Aldo Yan and Funk Maurice, this was the death of the bald Brazilian boys.
The refs, I think, are racist towards Brazilians, if I'm being honest. Davis and Figueiredo got a point taken away for the first time on the type of foul. So this does not have anything to do with any of our awards, but he did two fouls, right? He did the eye poke, I think, or something, and then he did the nut kick. But the kick was when Moreno was walking into him, he got caught with the front snap kick because he closed the range. And obviously that kick extends as it goes across, so it's going to be lower if you step into it. He got a point taken away for it. His first time hitting the groin in that fight. It doesn't make sense to me because
everyone was against Figgy that night.
If I throw a punch and you turn the back of your head and I hit the back of your head, I wasn't targeting the back of your head. You're going to take a point? Like, that's not fair.
Yeah, it's like everyone who dick kicks John Dodson, because like Dodson, when you try to leg kick him, he just runs forward into it.
You basically have to tell them stop throwing low kicks or you're going to no more kicking.
Throw rear leg kicks, not lead leg kicks.
Yeah,
because that's where most of the dick kicks come from. But I
want to shoehorn that argument in because I had no other place to put it.
Everyone was against Figgy that night. It's insane.
So sad.
Let's move on. Categories. We're taking a long time here.
That's fine. Submission of the year. I think this is generally going to separate into two broad categories. The first one we've already talked about, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaichi. Any notes on like the nature of the submission itself? Was super cool.
Very quick. Very quick. Gaichi went to sleep.
Yeah. The other one is the other one with several votes of is Aljamain Sterling versus Corey Sandhagen, which is kind of different in that it was kind of just like a classical Damian Maia style sub where he just worked his way to the back in a way that you'd be like, oh, he works his way to the back every single time. And then he choked him out in a way that was he chokes him out every single time. And it helps because Corey Sandhagen he's not as good as Justin Gaethje, but he is a genuine contender at 135, and Sterling just kind of embarrassed him and crushed him with ease. So the Moraes win for Sandhagen really helped with that because Sandhagen's not just a flash in the pan. But yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you pick because Gaethje's the better opponent, but Sandhagen just kind of got completely destroyed in a grappling contest.
It was almost like an early prospect loss, except Sandhagen is an extremely experienced fighter. So
he's still a prospect.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
That's what's shocking about it.
Like Magomed Ismailov is 34 years old and a prospect.
I mean, this is just another opportunity for us to say that MMA matchmakers suck dick. MMA matchmakers can lick my balls.
They bad.
Lick my balls, Batty and Dick. Officer, take me to custody. Look at my balls, Batty and Dick. This is like a music track of the year award. Fight side music of the song of the year award. Not right here. I'm inventing it on the spot, even though it's not fighting.
Here for it. Yeah, so those two submissions make a lot of sense as picks. One of the other ones I think people have been throwing around just based on like coolness and like uniqueness and rarity. Also a little bit of like you beat a pretty good guy with this. AJ McKee had that neck crank, the 100% on Darian Caldwell, who took him down pretty much right away. And then they were just playing with posture a little bit in guard. And I think he like sat up for a guillotine. I don't really remember the details, but it was a neck crank. It was pretty rare. People hadn't seen it before. And I mean, Caldwell is a guy who has been guillotined by Joe Taimangolo. So maybe pump the brakes on how impressive it is to submit Darian Caldwell. But like also Horiguchi submitted him, and Horiguchi doesn't submit people. So it's not like he has great submission defense, but it was just like it was a big win. Look cool.
Figgy Paris. Come to think of it. Figgy Paris, come to think of it, was a cool submission.
That was a cool submission. He forced that completely. It didn't look like he had it at all, and Perez still tapped. So strongest grip of the year goes to Figgy. Super crazy squeeze. But this category is actually a lot less interesting than I thought it was. But like,
yeah,
if you just want to go for like rare subs, you could also do like, I think Mackenzie Dern had a cool knee bar this year. But also like
Hannah Cipher's F in chat.
Talk about Hannah Cipher's ground game.
I mean, MMA overall is sort of moving towards like more knockouts than subs.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of the meta, like the whole sport meta is just more striking than anything.
I thought Oliveira Lee was a cool submission, just the way that the fight built toward it. It was standing guillotine, right? And then he might have ended on the ground, but
it was like a half guard guillotine. So
yeah.
That's like kind of unique.
Yeah. By the way that the whole moment of the fight, the momentum building up into that and the finish, it was cool. But if you're gonna go that way, then Khabib Gaichi is pretty amazing.
Maurice Green versus Gian Volante was an amazing submission, I believe, purely on the uniqueness factor.
Very rare.
Yeah, very rare. Like, just the guy gets so tired, he lays down on top of the other guy and then taps because he's so gassed. Simply because the other guy hugs him.
That was like the arm triangle thing, right?
Yeah, it was sort of like moving for the arm triangle thing, but just on the bottom, from the bottom, and
pulled his head into his chest and said, "You can't breathe now."
Yeah, it was just, I take your neck. And he was, no.
Like, because I've seen the arm triangle from bottom before, and like, who was it? I think Aljo did it to Takei Mizugaki.
He did.
But that was like an actual good one.
Yeah, it was a real arm triangle.
Yeah.
He was actually, the sub was actually in. It wasn't just Gian Volante deciding that he doesn't want to fight anymore. Even though he was on top and he was winning, I believe. Wasn't he winning? He did drop Maurice Green with like a counter hook. Yeah, Maurice Green went for this stupid Jackson Wink, like a Superman punch, and got dropped. It was really funny. Yeah, there's something so powerful in the idea of a professional fighter letting himself go so hard he just turns into some guy. I mean, respect it so much.
First, the breakout fighter of the year, John Volante, from being a fighter, broke down out of the pack of fighters attempting to be good to fighters who were phoning it in. And
to just
living the
people.
gimmick. Broke out from fighter to guy. It's nice.
He is a guy of the year award.
And last category is pretty much a wash. Went for most improved fighter, and everyone voted for Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
And a really good explanation if you want to hear about like how Charles Oliveira is better at grappling. Ryan went off in last week's podcast. I don't know how long that was, but I asked him a question. I was like, was it Oliveira's ground top game looking better, or Tony just kind of not being good at doing things off his back? And Ryan said, well, it's a bit of both. And then he just went into this entire thing about Oliveira looking good, and I don't remember any of it. So listen to that, because I'm not going to explain it because I don't remember. So that's one argument here. But yeah, why did you guys pick Charles Oliveira?
I mean, yeah, the thing that Ryan said, except pretend I'm the one saying it. All the smart things that Ryan said, pretend I'm the one saying it. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I've still been a Charles Oliveira doubter just because, like, his fight against Kevin Lee, it was kind of a weird one where he was outstriking Lee pretty convincingly, and we were like, oh, Charles Oliveira's striking is actually really, really good now. And then he got kind of laid on for a little bit and beaten on the ground, and you're like, oh, this is the point in the fight where Oliveira gives up. And then Lee kind of gave up first, and you're like, okay, well, Lee always does that. But then he beat Tony Ferguson, and that was genuinely super impressive. I think Oliveira was kind of like a shoo-in for this since the Lee fight, as much as I was like kind of doubting him against the Lee competition. And as much as we doubt Ferguson's state, I don't really think that fight goes any different with Ferguson in like 2017, 18, 16 necessarily. So, yeah, I mean, Charles Oliveira, I believe what Ryan said was that he was using his submission attempts a little bit more intelligently. And that he was genuinely cut off the escape routes rather than just like leaping on them and squeezing to death.
He was generally like harnessing his aggression in a more intelligent fashion. He didn't just go nuts from the get-go. He tried to set up things. He didn't try to set up things. He actually set up things. That's the difference. Like he looked clever on the feet against Tony. Like it looked like he looked at the Gaichi fight and took some lessons from it. Like, how can I use the same game plan? Some of the things that Gaichi had success using in that fight, and use them with my game in order to secure the win. That's what was really interesting about that fight.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the difference between using a front headlock as like takedown defense and jumping on a guillotine literally every single time. Is that, the first one was Charles Oliveira all the time, like before this year, before like the last couple of years, and now he's like using the triangle to get back on top and only jumping on the armbar when there are a couple seconds left. So it was a smart performance, and yeah, I mean, there weren't really that many super markedly improved fighters this year, which also helped. But Oliveira would definitely be a nominee in like any other year.
Yeah, I feel that this Charles Oliveira thing has been building since last year. Last year he had a bunch of impressive performances where he started to reveal some good jumps in like his skill competency, especially with his boxing. Right, he definitely looks sharper with his hands. He's always, people I think haven't seen his full career when they talk about him a lot. But as a person who's recently rewatched most of his career, he's always been an aggressive striker and favored a lot of the same weapons. It's not like he added new strikes to his arsenal, which is a thing that pundits like to say.
Yeah, it's always like
Velasquez wheel kick.
with fighter improvements. It's always like people always tend to think in terms of, oh, he has this new weapon now, or like he's added this new technique that he can use. When it really the actual progression, the actual real progression that makes most sense and is the most impressive is becoming comfortable with your tools, with your toolkit, and becoming more deep in using that same toolkit that you started out with, learning new ways to use it, and learning ways to use it in an intelligent way to actually secure your victory in a way that doesn't rely on your natural attributes, etc., etc. That's where the impressiveness factor comes in. That's where it really comes from.
One of the things, if you want to talk about like a new a new weapon, maybe in a broader conceptual sense. I'm losing it. Gotta finish. But he's a lot better off the back foot. When people pressured him, when people came after him, he always had his wrestling game to try to bail him out of those situations. But those high-paced grappling fights are often the ones where he started to get a little sloppy, make mistakes, like the Anthony Pettis fight. That's the one where he felt the need to scramble up and reshoot and got submitted because he didn't feel comfortable on the feet with Pettis because Pettis was picking him apart. But I mean, there's been other fights. I mean, people have been pressing him back. But he's done a couple things. One is he has definitely refined his pressure approach, so it doesn't happen as often where he needs to be the aggressor. And in order to do that, been growing into the weight class, got bigger, thickened up. Definitely has been training in the situations of I have to walk through fire. So I think just mentally got more used to getting hit and being hurt a little bit and how to work through things, but also like things like head movement and selection of his strikes and timing and footwork off the back foot. Just, a lot of the ancillary skills that help you do an approach have been filling in. And that was all kind of coming throughout 2019. And then in 2020, I mean, we have the Kevin Lee fight, which feels like a similar dynamic to a lot of the other fights. Just pressing his advantage and working through it. But then the Tony Ferguson fight is one of the first times where you see him know exactly how he's going to win the fight and just sticking with a really tight, conservative game plan and looking like an elite fighter, and not having any issues whatsoever against someone who even if regressed a higher skill level than a lot of the other guys he's been fighting. So I feel like it was coming, and then there was an entire concept switch in the Ferguson fight that makes you think, yeah, something's different here. He's doing things differently.
Yeah, this brings us to the topic of like what is actually an improvement and what people think an improvement is, because many people said that Gaichi's style turnaround was the most improvement, and like this is the most technical and good Gaichi that we've ever seen, like the sharpest, cleanest. But and I'm not saying that it isn't impressive. The style change isn't impressive, and he definitely looked really clean and like improved in many ways. But it's also not him really building on the style that he had before. It's not him like tightening the screws around in his game. And Kevin Lee is also another example where he tried to change up his style, and he went to TriStar because like apparently having a long wingspan and wrestling bases just automatically turns you into GSP now, which didn't pan out with Kevin Lee at all, especially against Chucky Olives, where he just basically he's had the same problems that he's always had, and he didn't deepen his pre-existing skill set and tried to change things up, and it ended up hurting him in the long run instead. So it's really like the preconceived notions of what an actual improvement is seems to be like not reflective of actual reality, in my opinion.
I've got another one.
Another
Which shout. Also, I forgot during Breakout Fighter of the Year. If you're using Breakout as like actual popularity, then no. But Breakout as in like this guy did some cool, impressive stuff and should be considered, and maybe he wasn't before. Bellator, Yaroslav Amosov beat Ed Ruth and Logan Storley in 2020 and just looked really impressive and really interesting, entertaining fights where he had to show all of his skills, and he just looks like a cool, interesting welterweight. And Logan Storley looked good, and Ed Ruth didn't look good. But yeah, I just wanted to shout out Yaroslav Amosov. I talked about him on the wrestling podcast as well. But I was thinking of that because Bellator, most improved. I would like to give a shout out to Aaron Pico for becoming. It didn't happen right away. People thought it was going to happen right away because he went to Jackson Wink. And 2021,
no,
still think that Jackson Wink is this elite game planning fighter development champion. It's not. It never was. Maybe that's a subject for another time. We can get deeper into it. But no. But Aaron Pico went 3-0 in 2020 after. People probably remember the Henry Corrales fight. He was on a 4-fight win streak after losing his debut. Was looking really deadly with the striking. Fights Henry Corrales, and they're banging in the pocket as Pico likes to do. and he came up a little short and got knocked dead. I think he was getting rocked a little bit before he got knocked dead and said, let's keep banging in the pocket. And then he got knocked dead. So that was everyone's like, oh no, Pico's not going to make it kind of moment. And then he makes the switch to Jackson Wink. And everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's going to use his wrestling now because he shot 1 takedown in his first 6 fights. And the one was when he got rocked by Zach Freeman. That's what led to him getting submitted. So he's going to use his wrestling now. So he fights Adam Boric, and he shoots the whole fight. It wasn't just like, oh, it's incorporated. It's like, no, I am going to spam takedowns. I'm going to wrestle nonstop. And there will be no nuance to it. And it was working until Boric got a kind of a read on the level changes and countered him with a flying knee, which is an insane way to win. But it happened. So that's 2 knockouts in a row. 3 times he's been rocked pretty badly in his career so far. Everyone's saying, oh no, Pico's done. Fights 3 people in 2020 who, honestly, yeah, they're kind of a similar level of the 3 guys he fought after his debut loss, because Leandro Higo's good. I'm not going to group him in with them. But the next 3 guys he fought maybe weren't so great. But what was nice was that Pico wasn't just walking them down and bombing on them because he knew he could. He was actually like trying to do a fight. He was trying to put a performance together. And, slowly but surely, first you saw him, once he did take people down, like his ground game and his top game looked a lot better. And he's like working through positions and had a little system going. So right then you're like, okay, that's great. Because he can probably take down everyone in the sport at least once. So if he can work from that well, then that's amazing. And then what I really, really liked seeing from him in the John De Jesus fight, John De Jesus is a training partner of my friend Alan, who is a good amateur fighter, but they both train in Pittsburgh. And he's always telling me about John De Jesus. He's like, this guy is really hard to body punch. This guy's really hard to wrestle because his timing on his knees, his counter knees, is really good. And then you're thinking about the Boric fight. You're like, all right, well, if he's going to have to take this guy down, then he's probably going to get counter kneed. And sure enough, De Jesus looked good enough on the feet to make Aaron Pico need to wrestle. Was picking him apart a little bit, was playing some nice outfighter roles in the fight. And Pico did the basic wrestler thing that you want them to do. He understood the interplay between his overhand and his level changes for his double leg, because they look the same.
Cheat code, the wrestler cheat code.
The wrestler cheat code. So they're against the cage, and he was feinting the level change, and De Jesus threw the knee. He said, okay, that's what's going to happen when I level change. So he did it again. De Jesus threw the knee, and if you know MMA fighter knee mechanics, you're going to lean back and probably expose your head and be in a terrible position to take a punch. And instead of shooting on him, he fired off the overhand. He knocked him out. It was pretty brutal. Maybe a knockout of the year candidate, but just shout out, call it comeback, call it breakout, call it what you want, but shout out Aaron Pico for discovering how to be an MMA fighter.
Discovering the basic dynamic.
In the 10th any wrestler fight of his career, he got it, he figured it out. But people thought he wasn't gonna. So I didn't think he was gonna, because he was at Jackson Wink, but he did. So props, shouts to Aaron Pico.
Yeah, I mean, this has gone nearly 2 hours. Night has fallen upon the Gallo household.
Yeah, it's black in here.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through all the categories, so I guess we should wrap it up. Anything final, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, no, I suppose the final thought from me is that these awards, it's not like they aren't really like all that interesting on their own. They're more like pound for pound rankings. They're only a tool that should be used in order to like launch a discussion into some of the deeper topics about fight analysis and all that, and what makes a good fighter, what makes a good submission, what makes a good knockout. And it's really an interesting tool that people underutilize a bit. They use it more as a popularity contest, and it can be much more than that, and which I hope this discussion managed to prove, and maybe we could build on that going forward. So that was really interesting. And yeah, I suppose that's all from me. This has been much more illuminating than I was expecting.
Yeah, you thought we were going to be dumb, but we were dumb about something.
I thought that I'm going to be dumb, not you. Also, I
We're
thought
all
my
dumb together, and I think that's what
yeah.
makes a good podcast.
yeah.
Shout out website of the year, fightsite.com, obviously.
Why?
Analyst of the year, Codex MMA.
We're putting this up on YouTube. Now, analyst of the year, there's this new guy who's up on YouTube. He's getting 100K and he's labeling every punch. You should check him out.
Shout out.
You know, very deep.
Breakout
layered
YouTube creator of
analysis.
the year, honestly, based on our definition. All right, let's sign off before we incriminate ourselves any further.
We'll see y'all later.
See you next time.